What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orrego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
How's it going? It's a Spill the Tea podcast with Will and Maria. It is so great to be back with you. Thank you for listening. However you consume us, we appreciate you being here. And we're still in June, so we're still celebrating, commemorating Pride Month, Maria.
We are, and I keep forgetting my Pride t-shirt every time we film. I'm like, oh my God, I have a beautiful t-shirt that I should be wearing, and I forgot it. But yes, we are back. We're back for part 2 of your story.
Which is funny because just to give people a little behind the scenes of the podcast, it was, I think, a couple of weeks ago that we recorded that last episode, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, we did it right before June started so that we had it ready to go.
And I am going to be honest with you, and I mean this in the most, honest way, is that was an emotional episode for me, and I didn't see it. In my mind, I'm like, okay, I've shared this story more than once on a couple of different platforms, but I didn't know that it would hit me the way that it did.
Which is also amazing, right? And I think when you and I decided to do this podcast, we wanted it to be honest and raw and kind of hit all those chords. And I think you sharing your story is not only brave and courageous, but it was also a beautiful episode. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please go back, listen to part 1, and then follow us in part 2 that is coming out.
Yeah, you're right now, if you're consuming this one first, you're just having dessert and then dinner and never any judgment when it comes to that. Not for me anyway.
No, of course not. I actually like that. That's a good way to say it. Also, I love the way that you keep saying consume.
I mean, I don't know, like consume, listen, stream, however it is you listen to your favorite podcast, right?
I love it. Okay, so Will, last time we talked a lot about your story about coming out, but we talked about it more so of what people reacted to, or even like how you reacted to telling the world, right? Including your family and your friends. I was hoping that today we could focus a little bit more on your like inner experience about coming out to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely happy to share that. It was funny because as soon as we finished, again, another behind the scenes, as soon as we finished our last episode, I feel like that was an idea. And you were kind of like, would you be willing to talk about this? Are you comfortable to talk about this? And I mean, honestly, yes, I am comfortable to talk about it. And it's interesting, right? Because when you said that to me, my initial thought was, you're right, because there is a whole concept of that burning thing that not everyone, but a lot of people, and I guess myself, felt, where you feel that need to share your truth with your family and your closest friends, and maybe in some cases your colleagues or people that you talk to on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. But then the biggest thing, which it takes a minute following that to realize it, is before you're able to come out to the world, truthfully, you have to accept and come out to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that because a lot of the times, especially during Pride Month, we hear stories about other people coming out to other people, or people listening and hearing stories about their friends, family, colleagues, right? But I don't think we emphasize and put a lot of spotlight on what it's like to come out to ourselves, and when we actually come into realization of who we truly are, or even like those little moments of questions and doubts and reflection that happen throughout our life, right? Until we're ready to tell people. But that's like at the end in a way, right? When we do actually finally tell other people, that's like the end of a journey that has lasted probably for years for every individual. So yeah, I think for me, I would love to know from your perspective and your story,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember when you first felt like there was something there that I don't want to say that you were different because it's not a difference thing, but maybe you had like friends, like guy friends that were like, oh my gosh, she's hot, or oh my goodness, I would love to like sleep with her, or whatever it was. And you were like, oh, interesting. I don't have that reflection.
See, that's such an interesting conversation starter, because as you're saying it and even thinking about how I was going to be speaking going into this podcast episode, it's not very clear cut as funny as it sounds. Well, obviously, your sexuality, your identity is something that you realize, I think, over time, especially if you struggle to accept who you are. And I would say, considering the fact that I did come out a little bit later, yes, openly so, I did struggle with accepting myself before I was able to share that with other people around me, for whatever reason. I think that for me, it was more so. Okay, so I'll start with this. I definitely felt like once I came out, once I accepted myself and then came out, then I went back and then I looked at, okay, so because that's always a question you get, right? People always ask you, so was there like this like aha moment that you knew that, okay, I'm not straight, I'm gay, whatever it is? And truthfully, looking back, there was several moments of it all. And you mentioned about the concept of feeling different. And at that point in time, like, yes, I did feel different because I didn't, as a kid or even as a young teenager, like, I didn't knowingly, openly, necessarily know a lot of gay people, or at least people who were open about it in my life, right? Like many, I had speculation, but again, it was, coming up as a young kid, a teenager in the 90s, things were so different. Looking back, I remember thinking about grade school and, whether it was someone in my class, like a guy that I thought was like cool, or, he was popular, or, he was probably considered, I thought he was probably good looking. Like, I think that those sort of memories might actually be some of the first signs of exploring the concept of my identity being different than many of those around me, and not just idolization, but probably some form of attraction at that age, right? I mean, I'm not a sex therapist, but to me, that's what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. It comes from there, right? When we're kids, we start looking and experimenting and seeing, right? And our bodies start doing things that we're like, wait, what was that? Right? Of course, it comes from when we're little. And I'm sure those were kind of the first little inklings and signs.
and it was like I mentioned in the last episode, where yes, I did have some girlfriends, and no, it didn't necessarily go all of the way. But I mean, I think at the same point, when I was at that age, I don't know. It's almost like I wasn't considering it, even though there were some obvious signs around me, or I wasn't accepting of that for myself. I didn't necessarily feel like I had any issue with anyone who was like. You hear these stories about people who aren't out, and they tend to be homophobic, or they tend to be judgmental. There was some like self judgment in terms of that, but I don't think that it was ever like, you know that's not who I am, or whatever. It slowly would happen over time. I think that the more that I kind of went from like a kid into a teenager, and going through puberty and all the fun stuff that goes with that, and then you're seeing like your buddies, your male friends, have interest in girls. And I mean, it's weird because it's not that I was like 100% aware that I was faking interest in women at that point in time. Does that make sense? It was like I wasn't necessarily like at that point I wasn't trying to just pretend to be interested in a girl because it was like the thing to do. But then as time went on and I would date, or I realized, it would hit a peak, which wasn't a peak, with having a girlfriend or a girl that you were dating. Then you kind of really began to do so at such a young age, some self-examination. But and I don't know if this sounds dysfunctional, but you kind of still feel like you're holding this thing that you just can't. At that time, you still feel like you're holding this thing that you just should hold to yourself until you figure it out. Because I feel like I had to process it myself. I had to figure out who I was, what that meant, and when was I going to be ready to have that conversation. And then, because again, I was like 30, right? Early 30s. And when I finally said those words, I am gay, and was telling people, and I was sharing that with people, I felt like there was points where I really tried to deny it to myself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the idea of being gay felt very like there was that negative connotation for me, for myself.
Mhm.
That is, trust me, and if you know me or you follow me or you've ever listened to me, like, you know that's not who you have in front of you now. But there was a time when I did have that sort of like, I don't want to, like, that's not me. I don't want to, be considered gay.
Did
But
you
over
feel
time,
like you doubted it? Did you feel like you were doubting your identity or doubting yourself? Or was it just like a rejection of like, oh, I don't know if I can be this?
I don't know that I wanted to admit that that's who I really was.
Okay. Yeah.
And I
And what,
didn't
yeah.
necessarily, and I, sorry?
No, I just wondering what was the fear behind that? What was the fear behind not wanting to admit that?
I just think that I felt like I didn't have someone or somewhere to go with that. Like there was no, I don't know, like not that, when you look at someone else
Mhm.
and you can kind of see what they went through, or it's almost like a template on what that would look like, right? Like we're kids. We're born, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are born with a mom and a dad, and you kind of get an idea for what that looks like, right? And while there were some people, I mean, obviously by the time I was 30, there was a lot of people, but as a kid and as a teenager, there were some things, some people that I was seeing on, on TV or in public or whatever. I didn't necessarily know what that would look like. And I think that um I didn't it again, it was almost like denial of admitting it to myself. And it took a while for me to fully accept that part of me before I was able to share that with other people. And I think that when you deny something or when you bury yourself in your career or
Mhm.
focus on things that take your mind off of your personal self, eventually, even though you think you can deny these feelings, and even though you think you can pretend you're something that you realistically are, what and this is like fuck everyone else's perceptions, right? Like I know people would say that it wasn't a surprise and it wasn't a shock, and people were saying things about me, and I know that they were, because I afterwards I had friends tell me that, right? People opened up to me about that. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, great, you were talking, but like that really didn't, that didn't push me forward or pull me behind, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was acceptance of myself, but then also understanding, what did it mean to be gay? And I know that sounds like such a stupid thing to say out loud,
No, I
but like,
love that question. No, what does it mean to be gay for sure? And for you, right? Because that's another, like, that's a personal question because everyone can have an idea, right, of what it means to be queer, but it's also your own identity. So you have to decide that. How is that for you?
I never wanted to be this sounds so funny. In a way, when it came to the whole definition of identity and accepting yourself and fitting in within the community, I think initially I didn't feel like I also fit in with the stereotype of what it meant to be gay, nor did I fit into being straight or heterosexual and the things that come along with that, right? I
Mhm.
also felt like, when I say this out loud, and it's funny because I was actually texting a friend about this the other night, is like, I never really felt like I fit into what that meant. Now, yes, there may be some things about me, or people are like, oh, well, he has this taste in music, or he's creative, or he, whatever, like mannerisms, like talking with your hands, or how you speak, or enunciating words, however it is you want to identify somebody being gay in 2025. I just felt I didn't fit into the stereotype of it.
I like that, but I like the idea of that stereotype because I think for a lot of people that are queer, they don't actually fall into that stereotype, and then I think that adds to the doubt, right? Or the like the fear of coming out, or like, what if I'm not this? What if I'm tricking myself? What if whatever, right? And I do think that we need to step away from those stereotypes and we need to just allow people to be because straight people are not all the same, right? Not all straight women are the same. Not all straight men are the same. Just like not all queer men, women, trans are the same, right? We all have our own identity of how we present and express ourselves. And unfortunately, I think the stereotypes come from online media, right? TV, movies, all that stuff. But it's interesting that for you, that was part of it, not having, first of all, not having like a mentor to talk to
Mhm.
about what you were experiencing, right? And then also not knowing, well, do I actually present as queer, quote unquote, properly?
And that's it, right? And I think it was like I might have alluded to this in our last episode because we went through a lot, but I remember after I had come out to some people, one person saying to me, asking me if I would be changing. Like, would I be changing, whether it was clothes or whether it was, attitude, like whatever, right? If anything, I finally felt free at that point to be who I was and to not be at a table with friends or family members and just to wait for that question to come up of, oh, so are you seeing a girl? Are you interested in anyone? And then not knowing how to answer that, but also being, as many people in the queer community are forced to become, masters of deflection, right? When you don't want to answer a question and you kind of answer that back with a question. But at least I knew that once I came out, I was able to feel comfortable in my own skin. And little did I know now, many years down the road, like the thing about some of the thing, I mean, even the concept, like the concept of doing this podcast, this specific episode, these last couple episodes, this, this would would never even been something I would have considered to do when I was like in my 20s, right? No, are you crazy? Like I would not have had like the balls to do it. Not that, I mean, people do it all of the time now. I get that. Like I'm not saying I'm special that we're talking about this, but for me, it was just something I couldn't see myself sharing to anyone, let alone on the internet, available for whoever wants to see, watch, and listen to it.
Yeah. But I think it's such a beautiful thing that you are doing it now and that you've done it throughout your career because you've shared parts of your story. But I think it's also, again, that stereotype of like when you decide to come out, you have to like post it everywhere and tell the world and like make sure it's like the front news, right? And no, you can take your time and it can be something that's private and beautiful and sacred for yourself. And you can start sharing about that as you wish. I always compare it to this idea of like, you never know who has like a foot fetish and people with no, but seriously, like why do we always expect people to quote unquote come out, right? Or to like announce it when it's like, but nobody else is asked to do that with their sexual preferences. I always love those videos of like when kids come out to their parents and their parents like, okay, and then it's like, can you go empty the dishwasher now?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that that normalizes, like, I didn't come out to my parents as straight. So, like, why would I come out of my parents as queer? Right? Like, I think, again, we're thankfully moving forward with this idea of normalizing these conversations and not having to make this quote unquote such a like a pressure filled thing to do. Because I think that's what people feel. Now, I want to go back to something you said because I love this. When you were at family like functions and
Mhm.
people asked you, like, when are you going to get a girlfriend or when are you going to get married and settle down? What did you feel inside of yourself? Like when that question was given to you, like what was the feeling that like went through you? And like what were the thoughts that you had while you were also trying to deflect?
I felt very nervous. I felt very anxious. I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I didn't, even though I knew if I really thought about it and I really truly knew, again, when I wasn't publicly out, I felt like I had to deflect, like I mentioned. I felt like I had to just get through it, answer this question, and then I'll put it back on you. And then I'm gonna answer your question with a question that takes it off of me. Because as much as I am a sharer with my life and whatnot, even prior to coming out, which is why like you said, everyone has a different stance on do they come out publicly or do they not.
Yeah.
I think that's why I did, and why it was such a big thing, a pressure thing that I put on myself, was because I did want to, like, I did want to share that with people. Like, I
Mhm.
actually did, because I shared everything else. So I was like, so that was what was so, I think, weird for so many people who knew me and who love me, is like, they didn't get it. Like, they did not comprehend why it took me as long as it did to share that, right? And I'm sure you can dive into the psychology of it and look at relationships in my own life and my immediate family, the world at the time. Like, there's probably, I don't think it's a black or white answer for that one.
Mhm.
But I did. You walk away and you think about it, right? You walk away and you're upset, or you just power through. It kind of just depends on the kind of day that you're having. Like, some days you're like, but then again, it makes you feel, it does make you feel alone. It does make you feel different if you're in
Mhm.
that room. And I remember going to weddings, like, and I've been to gay weddings, but going to like straight weddings
Mhm.
before I was out, and just feeling very uncomfortable there, in the
Mm.
sense of, like, I know that sounds so funny, because yes, I enjoyed myself and I enjoyed, my friends and my family and the food and the celebration of it all, because I also, just like, one thing about me, if you don't know, I love that part of life. I love celebrating any little thing. And I will make any excuse that you can to socialize or celebrate. Like, I am in. If you know me, you know that about me. But I felt, I don't know, there was a sense of uncomfortable, like, being uncomfortable in those events, feeling like, I think that for straight people, there's a probably a pressure to get married, let alone, like, I don't know why. That's just something that it makes me think of, right? But yeah, when those questions came up, I did feel anxious. I did feel stressed. I did feel uncertain on how to answer it. I think that if anything helped me get out of those conversations, it has always been, my ability to talk, or my ability to, like, not, yes, I've had my awkward moments too, and I think that as I've gotten older, I don't think someone would describe me as awkward. I
Mhm.
don't think that's the vibe I give off to people. Um, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't a good feeling, right? And that's why I now, when I have conversations with younger people, younger family members, it is important for me. And some people might be like, oh my God, that sounds so woke or whatever. But I think that it's important to keep those questions open ended. Because you
Mhm.
know what? If you keep those questions open ended, it shows that you're interested in that person's life, but it doesn't fill them with that pressure that they have to share something, what might be personal to them, or what might be hard for them to share. Because who knows, like, there is that perspective that some people think that now it is a lot easier, and in some ways it is, but in a lot of other ways I don't think that it is. Because look at the world that we're in. I was thinking about this the other, sorry, little tangent here, and then I'll get back to the story. I was thinking about the world the other day, and it's like, in some ways, this last year, even though I live in Canada and I have a loving family and friend group, it's kind of been harder now than it was 16 years ago.
Yeah, you just made me kind of take a big deep breath there because it's true. It's gotten just unkind. And I think you're wearing the t-shirt that says be kind. I think that's where we're at. It's just like this awful chaos right now, right? And you're right. These questions that we asked ourselves in like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and we thought in a way we had conquered them, right? That we had gotten
Yeah.
to a point where we understood and accepted and moved on, and like we're pushing all that like BS away. It seems to have come back up, and it's really sad. Like it's a very sad moment because I do feel as people that did fight hard, especially in the
Mhm.
80s and the 90s, it feels sad to be back in a place where it's like, oh my gosh, do we really have to do this again? Like it's, yeah. But
I
okay, let's
think,
go back.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Do you want to say one
I
more
just
thing?
I just want to say this, is that I think that there is a perception out there. Okay, obviously right now there's a lot of focus on the trans community, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of opinions on that either way, right?
Mhm.
Um, I will always support that community, because to me that's important. I understand that not everyone feels the same way that I do. but I still think that we have to acknowledge the fact that there are still some issues in this world with homophobia. There are still some issues in this world with being gay, being lesbian, being bi, being queer, as well as a member of the trans community. Because I think that, and I felt that more than ever this year, right? So I mean, that's I mean, I had to remove a couple of people off social media last week. People who I never thought I would be removing because some of the stuff that they were putting out there, I was like, listen, I don't need to see this shit. I don't need, there's enough things that we can like step out of our house in the morning that could possibly ruin our day or stress us out or make us upset or angry. You have the ability to control those things, then do what you got to do. Okay, that's it. Rant
I,
over.
I love it. No, that's amazing. And you're right. You're right. I think it's one of those things again, if you have nothing nice to say, then shut your mouth. Right? Please don't
Exactly.
say it.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah. Okay, so when you did finally, or do you remember when it started feeling more like, okay, this is who I am, this is my identity. It's starting to feel like the puzzle pieces are coming together. Do you remember that experience? I know you said it kind of like, obviously it's kind of like a long journey, but do you
Hmm.
remember when it started feeling more like you?
I do. I do remember when it was starting to kind of like bubble to the surface, so to speak. And I think that as much as you try and push any sort of feelings away that you maybe don't want to accept for yourself, eventually, I mean, unless you are, and I know there, I mean, there, let's be honest, there's been people in history who've been able to do this, but I obviously, thankfully, wasn't able to be one of those people because that can't be good for you or great for your mental health. And I
Mhm.
think that once I was starting to kind of explore that a little bit, talking to some people online, there were some instances where that worked out really well for me because I found I could confide in some friends or who became friends, or I could talk about how I was feeling, even though I wasn't necessarily talking to a professional at that point.
Yeah.
And then, you start to quietly talk to people, maybe tell friends and family that you're going out, but like really you're going on a date, right? And
Yeah.
then, and that happened to me too, like, secretly. And and then when I was in a relationship, and then I think I'd mentioned this, but like when it really was like I need to tell people this, when the relationship ended. Because I was like, I knew that I could not go through that. I couldn't go through the pattern of living that double life again, where I tried so hard for whatever reason, most of it probably pressure that I put on myself to not share that aspect of my personal life with people. And I'm not talking about dirty details. I'm just talking about like simply saying like I'm going out with a man or I'm dating a man or
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship with a man, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I was not allowing myself to do that. And I knew that when the relationship ended, when I was broken up with, and I at the time I was very heartbroken, and then I went through that essentially on my own. I knew that I had to find a way. I didn't know how. Even at that point, I did not know how I was going to do it. But I think in my mind, if I remember, I gave myself a year.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you like a deadline? Like you gave yourself kind of a
Like
deadline.
a rough sort of deadline. Like if I remember,
Okay.
okay, I think the relationship ended in April, March, April. And I think I remember telling myself, I have a year to figure this shit out. Because the way I was feeling,
Yeah.
I'd lost a significant amount of weight. Um, Again, this is a lot of pressure that I put on myself. I think that that's why I lost so much weight at the
Mhm.
time. And I don't even remember not necessarily like avoiding meals or anything like that, but I just remember like, and even now if I look back to photos of myself, I mean we can all shed to lose a few pounds, but it's like at that point I look back and I'm just like, oh my god, like wow, I was like really slim, right? But I know
Well,
why. I know why.
yeah, that was the pressure, the pain, right? And I think you mentioned like this idea of like you went through it alone, which would have been so sad and difficult to go through because not only are you living a double life about your sexuality, but then also going through a breakup by yourself and not having those people to support and love you through it, right?
And that's hard because I know that that part of it was very hard for my close family to understand. And I know that made a lot of people in my family sad that I did that to myself, in terms of the fact that I, you know, did that to myself. And I and I was always kind of like, you know what? I know, not the healthiest, openly, admittedly so.
Yeah.
Uh, but this is why I'm telling you now. Like at that time, this is why I'm coming out to you. In life, I feel like, some people uh react to situations differently. And I mean, no, I didn't have a therapist through all of that. No, I mean, I when I was before I came out, I did have, like I said, one or two very close, quiet friends who were helping me through the process,
Mhm.
um in addition to whatever else I was researching on my own.
Mhm.
But sorry, what was your question? I feel like I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but you did have a legit question.
Oh my God, I love that.
Oh
Well,
my
hold
god,
on. I'm gonna,
oh my
I'm
god,
gonna,
now my phone, like, Siri's going off on my phone now. I don't know
oh
why,
my
but
gosh,
anyway.
the best. No, okay, but let's circle back actually to something different. Did, how did it feel when you finally did admit it to everybody else? Like, I know you touched on this, the idea of like how accepting your family was and how beautiful that was. But when you finally like woke up the next day after telling everybody, what was that feeling like?
Oh my god, that was like, a it was like I felt like I had started my life.
Hmm.
I felt like I had started my life, and I felt like I was being authentic to, while I was telling family and close friends, I felt like for the first time I was being truthful to myself about who I was, and who for years I put these pressures on myself for a variety of reasons, I guess, to keep that a secret, right? The fears, the worries, would I be exiled from my family? Would my friends who were heterosexual still want to be my friends? Like those insecurities that came into play, right? It's funny because there's a scene in a movie that it always reminds me of, not so much what my scenario was, but it perfectly describes how I at least felt when I came out. It's an adorable movie, and I think that even if you have young kids, I would encourage you to show this movie to them. It's called Love, Simon. It's also a book.
Okay.
And have you heard of this
I
show or movie?
actually, I don't think I have. No, I'm gonna look it up. Maybe I know it, but I don't remember the title
So
coming to
in
me.
the movie, so Jennifer Garner plays the mom of Simon, right? The
Mhm.
kid. And one of the lines that always hits me and I cry every time I watch it is, she was like, you can exhale now. You can breathe now. Yeah.
Wow.
And even as I say it, like, I'm just like, because it's not even just that the movie. It's like that. It's so true. It's like you have this pit. It's like, I think it's like what would be defined as like a constant anxiety, right, in your stomach. Like, how do you define anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, and that's why I have such vivid memories of that time, even though it's been years. Because you really do feel like, okay, my thing was like, I told my immediate family, I
Mhm.
told my close friends, many of us shared some tears, shared some laughs, because that's just who I am as well too. Again, if you know me. And then, yeah, I did actually ask my parents if they could talk to some, aunts and uncles and extended family members, because it was important to me that they knew that. But it was also important to me that, I mean, okay, listen, I'm like, I am on this coming out tour. Like, I can only handle so many dates before I'm gonna have a breakdown, right? And one of the most beautiful calls that I got from my aunt and my uncle was actually, I don't know, I don't know if it was a Pride weekend, but it was in Toronto, and I was by myself in my friend's condo. I don't know where she had went, and they had called and said, it's one thing for like your parents to share some of that news that I basically told them to tell people, right? But it was also like the fact that my aunt and my uncle picked up the phone and called me and said, "So, you know what? We just talked to your parents. We just wanted to let you know that, like, we love you, and we don't, this makes absolutely no difference to us." And they even talked about another family member who, sometimes he shows up with the guy, sometimes he shows up with the girl, Doesn't matter. Doesn't make a difference to us, right? And then they had even, so this is a kind of a funny part to it too, which, like I said, you get emotional and then you laugh. When I was a kid, I would go, they had a pool and I would go down like their slide. It was a pretty high slide. And so the joke of it was like signal number one of being gay. I would like do opera. So I would be like, "Ah," and then I would go down the slide. And so they're like, well, we had our feelings back then, which honest to God was exactly what I needed to hear. Like that made me laugh so hard. I'm like, well, what can I say, right? So yeah, that's another memory from that time that I'll always cherish because, if someone does pour their heart and soul out to you, my only, unsolicited advice to you listening or watching would be please acknowledge it, because that just goes such a long way. And those are memories that will last for a lifetime. Or, I have been fortunate that even in all the years since, most of my friends who I'm close with, um, I've been able to have those beautiful discussions. And I've had friends say, listen, like when I was a kid, I was an asshole. Like I was mean to gay people, or I was, and I honestly, if someone tells me that, I'm not going to be mad at them or I'm not going to judge them. My thing is like, you're attempting to learn, right? And understand that, we're not, I'm not a stereotype. I don't want to be a stereotype. I want to be me, but I don't want to be a stereotype. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I love that though, the idea of people holding space for you when you did share. But I think I would say even like my last sip for today is just this beautiful idea of you holding your breath for so long and then finally releasing that and how beautiful that felt in your body. I just love the emotion that comes up in you too, because it's like you became, like you said, you started a new life. You started living fully and authentically yourself, and you were able to release all of that anxiety, right? And all of those secrets that you were holding for so long. And now look at you, you're able to share your story on a podcast and share your story with the world. And you're able to breathe every day and actually live authentically who you are. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That means so much coming from you and so much to anyone who decides to listen to even just like 5 minutes of this podcast or 5 minutes of my story. And the thing is like, I know I talked about a couple of specific examples of exhaling, breathing, letting go, opening up, being authentic. When I think about one, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that moment. Or, oh, it takes me back to another moment. You know what I mean? Like it's like when you don't, like, it's not, I don't spend every day of my life thinking about these stories, right? So it's like, believe it or not. So when I think back to that story, say with my aunt and my uncle, or telling my parents or telling my sisters, it also takes me back to some moments that I had on my own, where I
Yeah.
had like my own emotional release, or, if I was texting or talking to a friend, another release there, or even just like hearing a song, because music has always been such a huge source of therapy for me through that, but it still is. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, all of those memories come back. And that's why I think it's so important for us as a queer community to, if you can, and not everyone has to, but if you're comfortable talking about it a little bit, it doesn't have to be on a podcast. It could just be over a coffee with someone, right? It's like, I'll be so happy if I've, helped even one person in these last two episodes, because that's all that I want to do. Like that's sincerely all that I want to do. And like when I left radio and deciding to do this podcast, like I'm so happy that in addition to just whatever silliness or helpful things, maybe I can sometimes post on social media and then be able to talk to you. And when I say you, I don't just mean you, Marie. I mean you listening right now, right? Because it's so important for us to share our stories, because everybody, just like everyone in the world, we all have different stories too. We're not all the same.
Exactly. And I love that you were able to share your story, because I do think I don't think it's just going to be one person heart, like one person's heart that you touch. I think the idea of this, I love the theme of today was like that idea of like fear and doubts and insecurities and holding all of that anxiety. And then finally kind of like allowing yourself to take that breath and then be brave enough to say it out loud and then feel that release, right? It's that idea of like committing to what you believe in and then going for it and kind of just like jumping off the cliff and being like, I'm going to make it and it's
Well,
going to be fine.
And it's funny because I know in maybe on this podcast I've done it, or maybe I've done it in conversation. There's been times where I've said publicly that air quotes, I wished I would have, say, come out earlier. And at one point that's true. But on another point, I think that it's actually not true, because it's like, it's nice to be able to do something when you're ready. And I think it does show that it doesn't matter if you are 16 or 60. If you're able to do that, even if you don't share that with everyone else, you just share it with yourself and hold that close to yourself, no matter how old or young you are. I think that that'll be such a positive thing for you to do. And honestly, even if you don't tell a soul, you're helping others just by sharing that with yourself.
You are 100%. And it's always about that authenticity, right? And sharing it with yourself first, and then deciding what comes out or what doesn't come out. And it doesn't matter. I think the most important thing, and that's why I think this part 2 is important, of coming out to yourself and feeling that truth for you, so that you can breathe and screw everybody else, right? It's your life, it's your identity and your sexuality. So thank you so much, Will, for sharing this part of your story. It's so beautiful, and I know that it's going to touch a lot of hearts.
Well, thank you for having me and allowing me to do this on this podcast. And thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And it is Pride Month, so we're going to keep going with that Pride vibe. And don't forget, give us a follow at the Spill the Tea Pod on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, wherever you follow us. Subscribe and rate us 5 stars. I mean, it's Pride Month. That's all I'm asking for you to do, is rate us 5 stars and subscribe. And that is the extremely very gay queer tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for more candid conversations. Got a burning question or topic you want us to cover? Slide into our DMs. We're always here to spill the tea. Follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod, at Will Nash on Air, and at Sex Off the Pedestal.